There he is.
You can start.
We were just talking about you. I said, I know he's coming. He's been at my house. I know he's coming.
What page are you on?
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about those.
He's a glutton for punishment.
It's not.
I think you should hand that over. Second best is here.
Yes.
Thank you.
How many girls? 25. Yeah. And we got
Yesterday too wasn't too bad. A little windy today. I wish I could have brought home and got some more things. Let's get a good amount of stuff done yesterday. That's mine. I got rid of all my birds.
She wasn't.
So I started cleaning up the mess that they left behind. Finding pockets of eggs all over the place.
Yeah.
I had,
Before it gets warm.
exactly. I had about 3 months of boxes to turn.
Yeah.
Hardboard and
I haven't seen it in the drawing.
That's
I haven't seen her do her sketch.
Yeah.
I like it.
You? Good.
That looks really good. The charred corridor. Charred rectangle.
Yes.
No. There was like, sketch was a little bit more chopped up and folks wanted it to look more rectangular. But what he was trying to argue was reusage of some space, but I hadn't seen the finished product.
It was just something I mentioned.
What if you had other obligations?
Oh, yeah. You only get so many days. Oh my God. Yeah.
I know it's sitting by Stella. I just saw Karen drive in. So when he walks in, we'll stand up. Here he is. All right.
That's great.
We'll call the meeting to order. If you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the Union City Community Schools Board Meeting. Our meeting agenda is available for you to follow. The expectation for our board meeting is to follow this agenda closely. We operate under the Open Meetings Act and utilize Robert's Rules of Order to govern our discussion and decision-making process. There is an opportunity for public comment during our set agenda. We welcome the public to express their opinions during this time of our agenda. If there are any questions about the agenda or the board meeting process, please seek out one of the board members for clarification. Do we have any addition or deletion of items to the agenda this evening? All right. We'll next move to our first public comment time. This is the section of the meeting in which the public may make comments or share their opinions about items on the agenda. We ask you to limit your comments to no longer than 5 minutes per person to allow others the opportunity to speak. This is an opportunity for the board to listen to your concerns. It is not board practice to act on the concerns voiced during this meeting to allow for the board to do further research. Do we have any comments at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to our discussion item, facilities planning.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go through a presentation that I put together. Now the presentation has some slides you may have seen before, but I wanted to do this kind of as a whole.
I'm just going to move to Archie's seat so I can see.
So that we get an overview, and plus we're streaming this, and so people may watch this at home, and I wanted an opportunity for people to see kind of what the steering committee went through in developing the recommendation. So I'll try not to go too slow, but if you have a question, just let me know, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. So I wanted to, before we sort of get into where we currently are, I wanted to include this slide, which shows all of the schools that the Union City Community Schools has had over the years. This does not include the old one-room schoolhouses, as Marty Chard pointed out in our last meeting, but all of the larger schools that we've had, from the the old high school that was built in 1877 right here, and then remodeled in 1932. There was a remodeling that was done. You'll notice the roof here is flat. And then we had Union City Elementary that was built started in 1954. And I don't know the exact years, but somewhere along the line we had Sherwood Elementary that was built in the 50s, and also Burlington Elementary. Sherwood Elementary is now a church, and Burlington Elementary is where the fire station is now in Burlington. Both of those were closed before the year 2000. Actually, Sherwood might have been closed for the last time 2000, was it closed in 2002 or was it just before 2000? Right in that time frame. What?
I believe it was before, I know it was before 05, because I'm keeping
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was when we added on at the elementary, or maybe when we added on the middle school. And then the current high school that we're in right now, which was built in 1961, and then the most recent building that was built is our middle school down here in the bottom right corner. That was built in it actually opened in 1975 when I was in 8th grade. And I was in that building in its first year. Now, all these buildings, I assume, were built and paid for with bonds that the voters voted on and passed to borrow money to construct them. And the most recent one being this, the middle school, passed in 1972 and was paid off in 2002. So we've not had a bond for the last, to pay on the last 23 years roughly. Turn this off. I hear myself trying to talk over that fan. So since 2002, actually slightly before that, but through up till now, we've been using the sinking fund to do a lot of repairs, even some additions at the elementary and at the middle school. At times we've had sinking funds that were around 6 mils at their highest, where we had 5 mils. That was for a project that would last 5 years, and then a 1 mil that was for just regular maintenance things. And that has worked pretty well for us as a district. It's varied between 4.5 and 6 mils during that time period, depending on what the projects were. But a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, the state changed the sinking fund law and limited you to 3 mils in sinking fund. And we had a sinking fund that was passed in 2021 that was 3 mils for 10 years. But with a limit of 3 mils, it meant that our total collected, we estimated to be about 6 million over those 10 years, based on our taxable value at the time. And as we started to do the projects that we had, first one was the bleachers. That was the one that the voters really was at the top of the list, had been told to the voters that we would accomplish. And of course, with COVID, that one ended up costing us more than we had thought. And we've done some other repairs with that money to where we have about 3.5 million of the 6 million left. It became apparent looking at some of the things you see listed there, and there are many more than that, that the sinking fund was no longer going to work for us to do the renovations. And you start to think about, are these buildings going to last and make the best use of the money as we do projects and put money into the buildings? Is it a wise investment if you could only have a limited amount you can put into them, and then the buildings might not be usable after that point because of other problems? And so I set about with the idea that we needed to have a plan for whatever the next 30 years we're going to bring, that either we're going to be able to pay for these things as we go, which it didn't look likely, or we need to do something. We either need a plan for a new building, we need a plan for repairs, something that would put us through over the next 30 years. And I started to talking to the board about that going back a couple years ago, and a year and a half ago, in the fall of 23, the board agreed to bring Chrisman on board as a builder to help us develop our plan in terms of what we were going to do. And we have a couple gentlemen from Chrisman here tonight. Rob and Jake are both here that have been working with us on this project. And then shortly after that, we brought on C2AE as an architect to also help on the project. And Steve is here from C2AE also to answer questions that you might have tonight. And we were able to apply for and get a grant to do a study of our facilities, which both of them helped us on. And in that study, they found a number of issues, many of which we already knew about, some we didn't know about. I'm going to go through some of the slides, and I've talked about these before, and if people have been on our website, the documents that I've handed out to the steering committee are all on our website that show many of these. The study that they gave us as a result, that study is posted on our website, and so the full complete study can be found there. The need for secure entries at both our elementary and high school was something that was brought up, that we knew about, and they brought up improvements to our classroom amenities. Here's an elementary classroom. You can see the original bathrooms and counters and sinks. The lack of fire-rated walls and openings in many locations, both in the elementary and the high school. The accessibility of our restrooms, that we don't have handicap accessible restroom facilities in many locations. Kitchen upgrades, our elementary kitchen in particular is quite small for the current newer equipment that we're trying to use down there. In the high school, problem that we knew about is the pipes running under the building that we've had leaks in, that we had to close school for a day last year because of rusting and water leaks going under the floor. And we had to dig up a bathroom floor in order to repair that. And so we really wanted to move those lines overhead like we had done in the elementary back 20 years ago. We have legacy electrical switchgear that needs to be updated if we're going to get another 30 years out of these buildings. Again, fire rating on our corridors to help stop the spread of fire if it happens. So the building, if we have a fire in one room, we might be able to contain it to that room instead of it spreading throughout the building, causing greater damage. We have an old fire alarm system here at the high school. You pull that, you break the glass, and the bells go off, and that's it. There's no notification to the fire department. There aren't any doors that become unlocked or opened up to make it easy for students to get out. In some of our rooms, like our life skills area, we have outdated equipment. Some, you can see the oven there back to the 60s. Outdated locker room spaces with the old original showers. These are not the original lockers. These are replacement lockers, nevertheless. Let's just say that some athletes, especially football players, in the boys' locker room can be a little rougher on these lockers than other places. Our bathrooms actually are looking as well as they've looked in a long time. We actually did put some new partitions in those just, I don't know, however long ago that was. For a while there were just kind of cement block barriers between the stalls, but neither of the stalls are handicap accessible. And we'd like to do some updates in there and make them handicap accessible. If possible, maybe even turn them into individual bathrooms. And our science labs, especially in the high school, are in really bad shape with a lot of original equipment. The gas no longer works for the Bunsen burners, and the plumbing is underneath on several of them is rusted out. So we have a lot of work that needs to be done in those areas. So the results of their study showed that all three of our buildings are in need of significant repair, but the worst of the three buildings was the middle school, even though it was the most recently built. And that's in large part due to some of the construction techniques that were used in that building. At the time it was built, to save money, they had to switch to, let's just say, shorter lasting construction techniques. I've been told throughout my life, like I said, I started in that building in the 8th grade, that the buildings was built to last 20 years, because after the vote they had in '72, between then and when it was built, the cost of materials rose so much with inflation that they couldn't afford to build it with block the way they intended to. And so there were a number of compromises made. We have made that building last. I would say, and I'm going to give credit to the original principal there, Gene Panzari, was very demanding on students in keeping them from damaging that building. I know, but though, that a number of walls that were drywall have had holes busted through them and then been patched, and they've really tried to maintain that building, and it's made it last 50 years by doing so. But it was the lowest rated. This was a summary from the report that we received. And I want to draw your attention to this part, which are a couple parts. One is safety systems, fire rated walls, fire alarm systems are non-compliant. And especially down here, in particular the middle school, is difficult to repair and renovate because of atypical construction. And the outside of the middle school has areas where the stucco is coming off and needs to be repaired. Just the repair of the back of the gym area we looked into was going to be $100,000. And so another part of the study that was done was to look at our enrollment. Now this is a more recent projection than the one we had last summer. This one was done in preparation for going to the state with a bond proposal. And this projection is better than the one last summer, because this year we did go down some, but we didn't go down as much as they had expected us to. We went from 924 and 2324 to 908 this fall, and we're still right around that 910 number. And they are projecting us to be down in 5 years from now to 787, which I think is probably fairly close to where I believe we will be, around 800. We have around 250 students in our middle school right now. Last I looked, it was a little less than 250. Is it right? Right on 250 today. So, but our high school is at like 310 today, 305 in that area. So in 4 years, the high school is going to be, you could expect to be closer to that 250 number in 4 years, and because some of our biggest classes are in the high school. So we do expect the enrollment to go down. And I want to emphasize for anybody who hasn't heard me say this before, that our school of choice enrollment is very strong. We have more students that come to our district than that leave our district. We have over 200 students coming to our district this year, and around 150 that go to elsewhere. I would love that if every resident student came here, but the fact is we are going to lose some. that's this era. The fact that our district is a net positive, I think, speaks strongly to the programs that we have here and what we can offer, but it is true that we cannot offer the programs that some of our larger neighbors have. And so we do lose students to some of those programs. Primarily the enrollment decline is simply due to fewer families that have fewer children. And so a lot more of our housing has older people without kids, and the families that do have kids are having fewer kids in our district. So the recommendation from the facility study was that we should consolidate into 2 buildings. This would allow us to save on costs in terms of operations by decreasing our energy uses in one way, decreasing some of our resource uses in terms of maintaining the buildings. We only have to maintain and repair 2 buildings as opposed to 3. If you're going to have to maintain and repair older buildings, it's better to do it with only 2 of them instead of 3 of them. It will help us reduce our costs in some areas in terms of labor. That's primarily going to be in areas like custodial, maybe food service, not so much in our areas of teaching. I'm not saying it's impossible, but frankly, with the number of students you have, you need a teacher for each classroom. It doesn't matter if they're in 2 buildings or 3 buildings, you still need a teacher for each classroom. And so it may not impact that, but it can help us save, I think, between $250,000 to $400,000 a year are reasonable numbers to expect us to save in operations and in savings of maintenance by being in 2 buildings. So that was the recommendation we got. We did apply for some grants. By doing the study, we qualified for a grant we applied for last September. We did not receive that grant. The money instead went to some ISDs instead of coming to our local district or any other local district. We have applied for another grant that was opened up in the state, but you can see this was an email I got a couple weeks ago letting me know the status, which was that they received 51 applications for $650 million. And the total allocation for the grant is $75 million. Our request was for $42 million. I know Grand Rapids applied for, I think, around $65 million. At least they applied for $65 million for the grant in September, and they didn't get any. So I assume they put in the same application like we did. I'm hopeful we will know on this by the end of the month. If we're fortunate and blessed to receive that grant, fantastic. You know, even if we get some of the money, that would be great. But I think that as the steering committee talked about this, along with reviewing all that I went through, and I've gone through it very quickly here. We went through it in much more detail and had a lot of discussions about that on the steering committee, the different problems in our buildings. I think that I have the sense that, and I feel strongly that as a community we need to take control of our own destiny and figure out a way to fix our schools for the next 30 years on our own, because if the state does something to help finance what we do in terms of construction of our buildings for those of us in more rural districts without a large tax base, it will come with strings, and one of those strings will likely be consolidation. And if they do force us to consolidate, you know, that might go our way. It might be Athens and Tekonsha join Union City. I would love that personally, but it might go a different way. They might force us to go and connect with Coldwater or Harper Creek. And I personally, as someone who's lived in this community my whole life, I shouldn't say I've lived here my entire life, but I was raised in this community and I've worked in this community for 40 plus years and lived in it the last 15 again. And I really would like to keep our community school strong. And so I'm trying to be proactive and take this into our own hands. So we did have a steering committee. These are some of the community members that were part of that steering committee that met. We had 5 different meetings that each lasted a couple hours, went through many discussions about different possibilities and options. In addition to the people you see listed here, there were members of, like myself, that worked for the school. Our administrators participated at different times, different administrators, and maintenance director Spencer was involved. And so we had a lot of people working together. Almost all of them on the committee live in this community and are part of the community and will pay taxes in this community if we do have a bond. And one of the things we did, in addition to our discussions, was I did conduct a forum in which we had a few community members present. There were about 22 people there at the forum, including people from the steering committee, a few people from the steering committee, as well as myself, and a couple board members. And then we had the survey. The results of the survey showed us that the top thing of the 208 responses we received, the priority, and again, the way you should read this survey results is each person selected their top 7 priorities out of this list. And so when you see something that's at the top of the graph, it means more people put that in their top 7 than any other category. So in this case, more people selected air conditioning in their top 7 than anything else. The number 2 item was safety of our students from physical violent threat. Means 131 people put that in their top 7 out of the 208. And then below that, we had 3 that were very close together. Safety of students during emergencies like fire, those types of things. That was at 96 right here. Repair and replacement of existing facilities to extend life was at 55%, around 100 people. And then updating our classrooms to more current furnishings to be more usable in today's current environment with current technology. That one had 100 responses, around 55%. So those 5 were the top 5. And then we went to STEM labs and equipment, science, technology, engineering, and math. That was at 83. And then we had another 3 that were pretty close. Accessibility was next. Arts and music facilities, and technology for students. We're kind of in the next tier. From there we went down to cafeterias, media center, and then the bottom items. To no surprise, upgrading the offices was the bottom item. And playgrounds and sustainability, along with athletic facilities. And I think people put those there because they think we do a pretty good job on those right now, that we have pretty good playgrounds and maybe we're environmentally sustainable right now, or maybe people just didn't see that as the top priority. But those were the results of the survey, and I think those match fairly closely what the steering committee's thoughts were as well. So we looked at a number of options on the steering committee. One was to renovate all 3 of our buildings as they are. And that was going to be very expensive to do in order to make them last. The most expensive Eating up about half that money would have been our middle school, nearly half that money, because of the way it was built. It would essentially have meant taking the exterior walls and replacing them with new block walls and replacing a lot of the interior walls, so you're almost rebuilding it. Another option we looked at was, what if we just build a brand new building, all in one for K-12? If we did it all in one building, that would be the cheapest thing to do, rather than 3 separate buildings. But it would still be $70 million, and again, very expensive, huge increase in taxes. And I'm using, by the way, on the numbers for taxable value, $75,000. Chris Mathis, who was part of the committee, told me the average taxable value in the village is $70,000. I think in the school district it's probably a little higher than that, probably closer to $90,000. But I'm using that number as a even number. And you can see $1,000 a year for someone with that taxable value, that would be a pretty heavy burden. Even if we could convince people to pass it, that would still be a heavy burden to put on people. The only way we're going to get a brand new building in this district, I think, is if the state does come through with some funds for us. And this is all, frankly, the picture would have been much worse had our taxable value not gone up in the last year by almost $60,000. 60,000, was it 60,000? Yeah,
30%.
by a 30% increase due to the solar farms that we had put in. And had that not happened, the millage rates would have been even higher for these things. And we are hopeful that when we get our new taxable values, our total for our district in a couple of months, that maybe it'll go up even higher, and so the millage rates you're looking at for these things will be lower. So keep that in mind. We're hopeful, but we don't know that right now. We have to go based on the numbers we have right now. So what we also looked at, okay, so let's say we renovated the elementary and we build a new 612 building, and we've kind of pieced this together to be around 55 million, which would be 10 mills and still a lot of money. And so where the committee settled was on a renovation of our elementary and high school. We were trying to get down to 30 million, but one of the things that was said at the community forum was, if we're going to do it, let's make sure we do things the right way, and don't try to make the rooms too small or anything else. The committee went through and took out, I think, the original numbers we got on this from C2AE and Chrisman on the things that needed to be done. The committee decided a lot of the things that were, or a number of the things that were in there were more wants than needs, things we would like to do, but we really don't need to do them to survive for 30 years and make our buildings accessible and safe. And so although they would be good things to do if we had the money, we cut a number of those things out. I think the total was closer to probably mid-40s to going on 48 million, something like that, one of the numbers, and we reduced it down to 42, and then we got down to like 34, and now we're kind of back up to 35.8. So it's moved around, but it's done so as a result of the input of the committee. The steering committee was involved in all the changes, the things we removed, and then the things that we decided to add back in, or maybe add that weren't there. The steering committee was involved in all those, and when we had our last meeting, everyone in the room agreed that, as a consensus, that the plan that we were recommending was trimmed down about as low as we could go and do things the right way and represented our best choice. Could the board decide to do something less than this? Absolutely. The board, you all may still decide that because you are the decision makers. This is a recommendation the steering committee and myself are making, but you're the decision makers. You could decide that this is still too much money and we need to try something less. But I can't say that anything less than this would be a solution for 30 years. I believe that this is as close as we can be. I mean, I can't tell you what's going to happen in the next 30 years, but I think this is as good a plan as we could put together. Could you say, we're going to do $20 million worth of renovations? Yeah, you could do what you could do for 20 million, but I think in 10 years you're going to have a problem again, or sooner. And so this represents a plan to get us through the next 30 years in a positive way and move us not just treading water, but actually moving forward, moving forward into the next 30 years. So this could be the impact of this, because 5.9 mils is still quite a bit, but doing this plan, I believe we could reduce our sinking fund millage by about 1.5. We talked to Baker Tilly about this. We currently have 3 mills, which it's actually 2.98 with Headley, so it's 2.98. So it would actually be minus 1.48, I think, technically, not 1.5 when you consider the Headley. But we need about 1.5 mils to make the payments on our loan that we still have for the bleachers. At the end of the next 3 years, the bleachers will be paid off and our sinking fund balance will be essentially zero. And so you as a board could decide you don't want the sinking fund balance to go down to zero. That you might prefer that we only go down to say 1.6 mils, which would leave some money in there. The number we looked at was if we went down to I think Baker Tilly figured for me that if we subtracted 1.17 mils, we got to 1.83 mils, then that would keep the $300,000 balance we have right now available over the next 3 years. Only the new money coming in would be used to pay the payments. So 1.83 mils would bring in enough money to make the payment each of the next 3 years, leaving us with the 300, it's a little over 300,000 balance we'll have at the end of this year in the account to deal with whatever comes up in the next 3 years. Before we get on to the total impact of this, I will also point out I'm being openly transparent with the voters in the community that I have checked with our attorney, and there is no way that you as a board can guarantee that the sinking fund millage will be reduced for the next 7 years by 1.5 mils or 1.17 or whatever you decide. Because it was passed by the voters, not even the voters can repeal it. We have the ability to levy 3 mils for the next 7 years. It's been voted on, passed, and it can't be undone. So when you look at advertisements for other school districts that are doing similar things, like, for instance, Brunson's, they've advertised that they intend to reduce the sinking fund millage by 0.99 mils. From theirs is at 1.99, I think, or something like that. The board can say you intend to do it, But the ballot will still say 5.90 mils. And this board can vote to only levy 1.5 this December, but it would require the board each year voting again how much to levy and agreeing to only levy 1.5. So, yeah, we can't, all of you as board members could make that pledge publicly as individuals, but it'll be the cumulative board vote each year on how much to levy. And I don't want anybody in the community thinking that we've bamboozled them or tried to slide a fast one by them by simply saying that and not recognizing the reality. So, but if the community accepts all of your words and recognizes this, that would make the increase as low as a potential increase of 4.4, which would then bring for that homeowner, it'd be a $330 per year increase, which would be $27.50 a month or less than $1 a day, which I like putting that in there, less than $1 a day.
Even in February.
Yes, even in February, it's less than $1 a day. And this is the point in time where I like to say this. My kids went to school here, I went to school here, my parents went to school here, my grandparents on my dad's side graduated from Union City High School back in the late 1920s, early 30s. And so my entire family has benefited from these school buildings that taxpayers voted and paid for. And we have not had a bond that we've paid on for the last 23 years. And my kids were in school throughout that entire time. And I wasn't having to pay for these buildings. And I feel a sense of obligation to pay for buildings as a taxpayer. And so school districts like Springport are voting on a bond, and their millage rate will be 6.1, but their millage rate has been 6.1. And they can advertise theirs as no tax increase. And that's great for them. And if their voters view that as no tax increase, that's great. But their taxpayers have been paying. And so I feel fortunate as a taxpayer that I haven't been paying the last 23 years. So I just like to say that. That's my own personal feeling I'm throwing in there, I guess. These are some of the things that would be included for the elementary school in the renovations. Almost all of these apply to the priorities of that the community presented. Adding secure vestibule at the front of the building. Replacing the unit ventilators with air conditioning. Enlarging the elementary cafeteria and kitchen. Because the kitchen space is already small and we're adding 5th grade to the elementary, having the additional cafeteria space and a larger kitchen are very important. There are some foundational repairs that need to be done. Some of the classrooms do not have more than a single window or maybe 2 smaller windows. Replacing the bathroom facilities, casework, the counter areas in some of the older classrooms especially. Replacing the boilers with new boilers to be more energy efficient. The doorways in some of the older rooms, doorknobs instead of handles. They're not very accessible. The doorways are not accessible. Can't get a wheelchair through them easily. And they also have some windows in the sides which can be broken through in case of a physical threat. There are lighting upgrades, electrical service upgrades, fire code updates, ADA signage, ADA toilet facilities, and adding a classroom. So all of those that are listed there The building itself would not look very much different. There's the secure entry that we would add to the front of the building that would hopefully allow the people, visitors, when they come to the building, they'll have to buzz in and go through the office before they are in an area where students are. If you ask me if this is important, I can tell you that in the last 3 years we had a parent come to the building. They were told because of a report that we had that they were not allowed to enter the building. Unfortunately, the door got cracked open and they grabbed a hold of it and wedged their way through it, shoved the principal out of the way to try to get into the building. Now, fortunately, they were stopped at that point from getting into it. I'm not saying that that person intended to harm a student. They were just in an agitated state. But being able to keep people coming to our building from the students while being able to do business with office staff is very important. And the other additions to the building would be the kitchen addition, and then the cafeteria being expanded into where the current kitchen are. And then we are adding one classroom, which would actually be for our kindergarten class. And then we will have 3 classrooms per grade level from kindergarten through 5th grade. So that's the changes to the elementary, not very large in terms of to the physical building. Then we have our middle school and high school. This has more changes because we are combining the middle school students, the 6th through 8th graders, with the high school students. These are the upgrades that are done there. Again, the secure vestibule, replacing the unit ventilators, so we are bringing air conditioning to the high school and middle school students that they've not had and have suffered through. And again, air conditioning was the top item on our survey. It would move the water lines from the high school overhead. We don't actually move the water lines. We simply stop using the ones that are below and put new water lines in overhead. We would be dividing our middle school, our current high school, into 2 halves, so that our middle school would be on one half of the building and our high school would be on the other half. We would be doing this in a way that we would not have the mixing of high school students and middle school students during the day for the most part. There would be shared spaces, and those shared spaces would be supervised, but I believe we figured out a way to keep them separated for the most part during the day. There would be an addition that would provide a band room, cafeteria and a kitchen, an art room and a STEM room, and a resource room. Now, I should say that specifically what is in the addition might change depending on as we design it and get architectural plans and those things develop. There can be changes in that. This is just the current iteration, so to speak. So don't get anything locked in your head entirely, but that's the current intention. We'd be replacing the classroom doors, which again have knobs instead of handles. They are not safe doors. They can be broken through easily. There's glass skylights at almost all of them, which can be broken through. We would be rekeying the entire building, again for safety, putting on the ADA handles. We'd be putting in the fire alarm system that would notify the fire department in case of emergency. If we have doors that cross corridors, they'd open in case of emergency or close or whatever the case might be. We would have renovations in our life skills area, upgrading of our locker rooms. Perhaps we'll put in single person showers, hopefully. We'd probably add some cross corridor doors. Remember the old chains we used to bring down in the high school for events, keep people out of the halls? We had to get rid of those because they're not safe. If we have cross-corridor doors, we can prop them open during the day, and then at night we can close and lock them so students can't get into the part of the building they shouldn't be in. Right now, if people are in here at night, you will find little children running around the halls down here at night during events with no one supervising them. It's not the best situation, so having those doors would be helpful. Having electrical upgrades. You want to explain blue light system? You can explain it more adequately than I can.
Think of a fire alarm to call the police. So you pull it down just like a fire alarm, and it does automatic notification of the police.
Okay. So emergency, but not fire.
Emergency, yeah. This is for something that is, fire may still come if they're automatically dispatched to the types of emergencies. but
Right.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
So any student can signal that there's a, dangerous situation.
Okay. Thank you. Modernizing all the classrooms in the building, updating things, flooring, that type of thing. Renovating our science labs, which are in desperate need and have been. We need hood vents that can be used and be able to have Bunsen burners and those types of things. It would require a new parking lot in front of the building, and it includes some updates for the we've been having plays in the gym. We just had one this past weekend, The Littlest Mermaid. But to put that on, they have to go on and climb on the roof of our locker rooms and hang plastic over the windows to block the light from coming in. Every time we do a production, there's somebody up there hanging plastic or tarps over our windows. So it'd be nice to have some curtains or blinds that maybe would be able to, be nice to be even electrically going up and down, but even if we use the old cords to do that. A new stage curtain, which our stage curtain is in not great shape, some new lighting maybe, some sound system, some of that kind of thing would be nice. ADA access for bathrooms for all of our different facilities. Update our restrooms, they need to be done, and we would move our wrestlers to the band room. And you said, why would we move the wrestlers to the band room? Well, first I'm gonna talk about how we divide the building, and then I'll show you why we'd move the wrestlers to the band room. The red line would be the division between the two. I think as the committee talked, and I know when people first hear about our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders joining the high school, we do know that other districts do this around us. Athens does this. They have the middle school and high school in the same building. Homer has this. Brunson has this. A number of districts have this, so it can be done. But we feel very strongly that we want to keep them as two separate buildings. We're still going to have middle school and we're still going to have high school. And we do not want them in the halls together. One of the things about our building being sort of in a square, our students have always in the high school walked around the square. And we wanted to figure out a way to essentially stop that from happening so that those students were not mixing with each other. So the red line divides it. On the right-hand side, you see the high school. Students would enter the high school through this door unless they are dropped off by their parents, in which case they'd come in the front door. Or they could, I suppose walkers could come in the front door, but most students that either drive and park or are dropped off by bus would come in through the east door. Middle school students dropped off by their parents or bused would likely come in through the west door and enter that way. Again, if I shouldn't have said dropped off by parents. If parents drop them off, they probably will drop them off and come in the front door. middle school students don't usually drive. So we don't really need a lot of parking for them. The high school students would stay on that side of the building, middle school students would stay on this side of the building. The only exception would be the shared spaces, which I'm going to show you in the next drawing. You will notice though that we change some current areas. One is the current wrestling room, weight room, which is up in this area, right here. And we divide that, and specifically the reason we moved wrestling and weightlifting out of there was so we could get this divided building idea. By putting the classrooms in there instead of in the addition, it allows us to divide the building and keep all of the middle school students in that area. So you're going to have 6th grade here, here, and here, 7th grade here, here, and here, and 8th grade probably here, here, and here. Now again, don't hold me to these exact things, but that's just kind of the idea at the moment. Architects get involved even more than they've already been involved as things develop, and because of things that we find, maybe it can't be done a certain way, you have to make adjustments, but our intent is very clearly to keep those grade levels separated from the high school students. And all the high school classrooms would be down here. Now, all the high school classes we have now will fit in this area. And that's maybe what people don't really realize, is that these rooms are not classrooms currently. That is not a classroom currently. So really we only have 6 classrooms that are currently on that side. But we also have classrooms over here that aren't used. This is not used. It's office space at the moment for our technology director and our curriculum director. This is an art room right now. We're going to split that in half and make it 2 classrooms instead. And then some of the rooms are things like band, art. We're moving into that shared space. We're going to have an art room that's shared by middle school and high school students. So when we look at what the whole thing might look like, it looks something like this, where we have a shared space with a cafeteria, a kitchen, a band room, an art room, a STEM room for our middle school science lab. That it could also be used by high school students when they're doing maybe robotics things specifically, but probably would mostly be used by middle school students. And then we have a resource room in there. We do need a resource room space. It's been a concern. One thing we're doing is turning the existing kitchen, which is a very large space. I don't know the exact square footage off the top of my head, but with the closets that go all the way out, I think it might be like 1,800 square feet or something like that. It's quite big. And we should be able to use this room because, as we said, our high school is going down in number. And so that room, by the time this would be built, which would be wouldn't be opened until 3 years from this fall, we'll probably need 1 less high school classroom. Unless somehow our enrollment goes from currently 250 in our 5 through 8. When those kids get to the high school, if they're more than 250, but if they go down to 250, that probably would be a room that could be used by either middle or high school for resource or something. So we have 3 rooms that are in that category. We have other spaces that could be used as well that we haven't even talked about using yet. And I'm just going to point out one. This little room right here, which looks very small in the drawing, but it's actually probably 800, maybe not 800, 600, 700 square feet. It's got storage, most of which is central office storage. And we're moving the central office out of this building. So that all could come with us. You could put a window in there and easily work with 10 students in that room. A parapro could be, or a special ed teacher could pull kids out and go in there. Might want to put a window in it, you know, but it is a space that could be used. So we have flexibility and options. And again, as everybody will see looking at this, this is my drawing. So don't hold us to this. Don't lock this in stone. This is not an official thing, but it's an idea of the amount of square feet we try to stay at is about 16,000 square feet, which hopefully gets our cost right at that 35,800,000 number. So, in this configuration, I wanted to point out that the traffic would be, for the high school, would be people could pull in here, they'd go through, and then pull out here, be a circle. This would be a parking lot area. And then the bus traffic would go around the building like it does now, for dropping off and picking up students. And we probably maybe would have enough parking out here for staff to park. High school students would all park here, and this would be visitor parking here. And then in the evenings, for field house events, since we're taking up parking here, this would be used as parking area for the field house. It might be a slight reduction in parking though. So one of the things we also did was, and this was again suggested in the community forum that we had, was if you're going to tear down the middle school, tear it down. Whatever you're going to do with it, do it. Don't leave it as an eyesore. So if you're not going to tear the whole thing down, whatever part you're going to keep, do something with it. Or either that or tear the whole thing down so that we know that the project's done and we're good for 30 years, hopefully. So I asked and received an estimate for basically taking the gym over there, which is built out of block, and the current 5th grade wing, which was a new addition built 20 years ago and is built out of block, and turning those into keeping the gym so as a practice gym, keeping that 5th grade wing where we could put a district administrator office, and we could use half of it for board meetings, so we're not going into the library all the time and moving stuff around the library. Or we could use part of it if we needed to for Charger Academy, one of the rooms. It does give us 5 or 4 classrooms. Maybe we need to use a couple of them if we have a huge increase all of a sudden and we need a room. It just gives us some options, and they're good rooms, block rooms, and tearing them down seems like a waste at this point. And so and we did put a new boiler in that building with the money from the COVID from the federal government. And we did put a new air conditioning unit on the practice gym. So it makes sense to use those things since we invested in them. So it would keep those, it would put a new lobby on, and it would add a parking lot where the middle school is torn down. And that area kind of becomes a recreation area, because in the summer, we all know that there are hundreds of people out there playing ball. There are people that might like that use that gym all the time, and yet we don't have a real good way to get people to sign out ball fields and kind of supervise that, have the equipment handy. So the district office being there, we're all in the summer anyway. It kind of helps in that regard. So all of that is about $2 million to tear that down, make those additions in the parking lot, about $2 million. It does not include any money to build fancy offices in there. It leaves them just as classrooms. I don't want people thinking that. The people that will work in there are on their own to put up dividers and put their desks in and figure that out. So we're not spending money on building district offices. We're just keeping it as it sits right now. Okay? Nothing in the bond for fancy offices for anyone. Don't want that to be out there. That is the entire presentation and the recommendation.
Can you go back and show the cafeteria and the space that's available for the field house?
Here.
Talk about that just for 20 seconds.
Oh, sure. By doing it this way, it solves a couple problems that we've had. One is that with our field house, when we have volleyball tournaments or like we've hosted wrestling tournaments, larger ones. Recently we've hosted them in the gym, but we've had wrestling in the field house. One of the reasons we moved back to the gym was because there's no place for athletes to be when they're not competing. So if you have a volleyball tournament, there's matches going on the floor, and then you've got 6 teams that aren't participating. And where do they go? Well, they're trying to share the small foyer that all the spectators are in. So having that cafeteria connected to the field house means that space is available also for athletes and participants to go to, or for volleyball players tend to bring in all of their crock pots and food and all that stuff and spread out, and so it provides a space for that. It also gives us a nice place there connected to the field house for having community events, meetings, etc. One of the reasons I wanted it drawn with a hallway and a wall was so that it could be closed. The doors could be closed if there's something going on, but people could still be in the hall. Our current cafeteria, we tried to figure out a way to make that work and keep that as the cafeteria, but it's actually more hallway than it is cafeteria because students walk through there, and it's kind of difficult to think about, 6th graders or 8th graders going to class while high school students are eating, or vice versa. And so that's why a new cafeteria worked as a better option. And one of the things we've talked about was maybe having lunch periods that were like, maybe 6th, 7th, and 8th, or 6th and 7th might eat together from 10:30 to 11, and then from 11 to 11:30 we could have 8th and 9th graders eat together. They're both in the same building, they could eat together, they're close in age, and then maybe 10th, 11th, and 12th would eat together for the last lunch period. That's just one idea. We pretty much have to keep high school between 11 and 12 for Math Science Center and for Career Center. So they really lock our schedule in terms of the high school. Another thing you'll notice on here is we moved the wrestling room and the weight room right here. The wrestling room took over the band room. The weight room is here, but we did need to put in a locker room for the wrestlers, because if you think it through, if this is the middle school gym and we really are trying hard to keep those kids separate, we need a place for football team to dress. And the small locker rooms from the field house just don't work for that. And we've already got the basketball team. We got the basketball team in there, but in the football season, that locker room is not going to handle JV varsity football. It's not going to handle 25 wrestlers and 25 basketball players at the same time. It's not going to handle 30 track team members and 25 baseball players. And so by putting a locker room there, the boys can dress there and be right next to the wrestling room, the football practice field, football field, the baseball field. And then as far as the girls' sports, again, keeping them away from the middle school locker rooms. During volleyball, the girls already use the field house. During basketball, they already use the field house. And during softball, the girls could use the middle school, the old middle school lockers across the hallway in the building that we're keeping open. Sometimes in the bad weather, they use the gym over there anyway. They could have their equipment there. It's near the softball field. So they could make use of those locker rooms and practice out there. And that way, again, we keep the middle school locker rooms for middle school kids for middle school sports. Keeping those kids separate. Okay? Do you board members have any questions about anything in there?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Were the drains still a concern in this building, in the high school?
I will let you guys speak to that, the drains in the high school.
I cannot remember right offhand, sorry. I'll have to go back and look. It's been a while since we did the report.
Okay.
But
About the sewage system in general, or?
I mean, yeah, I thought we had all cast iron underneath the hallways and everything.
yeah, I mean, as part of redoing those restrooms, we're gonna have to be replacing all the drainage lines that are within those spaces, and then we can.
Okay, I
If
didn't know
we
if
are
like,
worried about that, then we can televise the rest of the lines too.
okay, I didn't know if like all the halls and everything had to be ripped up.
I hope not. You got nice terrazzo. We wanna keep that.
'Cause that's what I was concerned about.
Yeah, we hope that the drain lines are okay. It's the water lines that are the real concern because of the rust.
The worst case I've ever seen it with cast iron was when we redid the kitchen over at Colon Schools, and that was a lot of hot water and grease going down. So that should be an outlet already. So
I do know that in the elementary, when they moved the water, they only had to move the water supply lines overhead. The drains were kept down there okay.
So like
And,
cast
you know,
lasts a long time.
Our old septic tank that this building had when it was built has been taken out and removed because we connected to the sewer long ago. But when we did the bleacher project, Ryan, Mr. Nagel was very near the septic tank, and he said, "Let me just get that out of there while I'm here." Yeah, so he opened it up. Actually, didn't take it out; just opened it up, filled it all with gravel, and so we're not worried about that. But yeah,
And they can be relined too in some cases.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Awesome. Oh, I do have another one. Could the student lounge be turned into a classroom at some point?
the student lounge here,
Yeah.
if necessary, it could be. Likewise, the cafeteria. One of the things we have looked at is the cafeteria. We could probably add a classroom there, or a classroom in a couple smaller rooms. We're not using it as cafeteria anymore, so it's possible maybe instead of having a resource room here, we could build one in there. A lot of it will just depend on what cost is, how the cost comes out, whether we do that or not. I didn't draw it when I drew this because I had been told that we could not build a new courtyard, and I didn't know if putting a classroom there constituted, if you're adding a classroom onto a courtyard, it meant that you'd have to put in the sprinkler system. But if we formed a courtyard outside, another courtyard, we would have to put sprinklers in. So I stayed away from anything that was on the courtyard. But so yes, a room could be possibly added there instead of one of the rooms out there.
So we have a lot of options then.
We have an option there. At this stage, I think it's important that not only the board, but and I think a lot of you or most of you are already aware of this. I'm just going to go through it, but I'm not trying to condescend. I'm just explaining it for people that might not know. The process going forward is that right now we're doing design and to go for a bond, and then Well, maybe Rob can explain that better than I can, going forward. Rob, you wanna explain that?
Sure. So
How we go from this to the, then getting to the state, then getting to the election, and then the parts that happen after the election.
Exactly. So this is the words we use in this part of the process is the conceptual components of it to understand the needs of the community and help kind of bring that together with the status of the buildings. You saw the reports that Chris presented already, and kind of bring those together. Because our job here isn't to tell you what to do; it's to help sort the information and present data and allow a conversation to happen. So we'll go through that, and then if that is the will of the board to proceed under the current situations that we've got with the financial analysis, we have to make a recommendation to state treasury. They have all kinds of criteria that they evaluate to make sure it is good use of educational practices and financial considerations and things like that. So after the treasury reviews it, and we are strongly expecting that they would approve it, then it would come back to the board to recognize that and then call for an election if that is the will of the board, and then that would put that then on the ballot to be voted on by the community if that was the decision to do it. So we're kind of working our way along these incremental steps, but did that answer the question? Is that what you're hoping?
Yeah, so that would go from, the meetings we would do for that would be April, I believe we said we'd have to have a special meeting April 7th. We go to Treasury on the 3rd.
Yep. So there's an appointment with Treasury where we do the review, and they say, this makes sense, we understand it, the numbers all line up, and then the board after that, when Treasury has reviewed it, acknowledges it, and then makes the formal vote to call for the election and put it on the ballot. And that would, under this current timeline and recommendation, is on the August ballot. And there would be some engagement with the community between now and then, of course, if this is the will of the board. And when it passes with an election, then we would get into what I think you're going for.
Yeah, then the next phase is when
design.
is when we get involved with actually working with the architect to get a real design. But we can say we're going to do all these things now, but this is just kind of a budget. Even after the design, you have to then get bids and see what the bids come in. And if the bids come in too high, you may have to cut some stuff out. And so I don't want anybody to come back and say, well, you said we were going to have a STEM room out there in that new park. Well, after the bids, if the bids come in, if we have another thing like COVID, and all the prices go up or something else causes, and we don't get good bids, well, then we have to cut stuff out. If the bids come in low, we could either add something in that we wanted to do but had cut out earlier in the process, or we can say, we're not gonna borrow and use all that money.
Yep.
But this first part is getting a dollar amount target, and then getting the voters to approve it. Once they approve it, 35.8 million is all you're gonna get to spend.
Yep.
So you're locked at that amount, no matter what the bids come in at.
Exactly. But the plan is meant to be, a very close representation of what it could become, and then to give the district the flexibility to adjust based on those market factors that no one can predict, but we can attempt to forecast.
And there is, I'm gonna say padding. There is contingency money.
Yep.
And there's acceleration money projected into these amounts, so that if you're building it 3 years from now, we know prices will go up. So that has already been factored into these estimates.
Yes, and all of that conservative estimating, where we set aside dollars for the uncertainties, because at this stage, there are unknowns. That's all the district's budget. Like that's not for anyone. Look at design. That's not for Chrisman. That is for the district. So you guys maintain control over that, and as it goes up or down based on the design and the process, that is for the district to use. It's not for anybody else.
Yeah, and there's contingency money in case we find something is in trouble that we need to do that we hadn't anticipated, and those kind of things. So,
Exactly.
The hope, I think, is that when you're done, you haven't had to spend all the money you were allowed to borrow.
Yep.
That's the hope, is to come in underneath and be able to not have to borrow it and spend it. I don't know how often that happens, but you know, the board will have to make those decisions as we go along, assuming the bond would be approved. Another question I had been asked was, what if we get the grant? I'll get a grant at some point. It just means that however amount of a grant we get, because the grant we applied for is to do this, that we wouldn't need to borrow that money. We wouldn't need to tax people for that money, for that.
Question. We applied for the grant for this section of $75 million. If they have another, would we technically, since we're consolidating, we would still qualify for?
And we will still apply for it.
Okay.
And not only that, I have meetings scheduled with representatives from our district to appeal to them to just put some money in the budget for us.
So
If I can get them to do that, I doubt. But hey, several schools did one of those grant things last summer. They just had their, a Detroit school district got $15 million for an athletic facility. It was just written right into that grant. So everybody else is fighting over $75 million. They got $15 million written in. So obviously their representative somehow did that. So I'm going to try. I'm doing everything I can think of to gain these funds to be able to do this.
And since we are consolidating, we would still qualify for that.
Yeah,
If that's the plan.
absolutely.
Just tell them to put posters up all over the schools. Vote for.
Any other questions? Or I'm done with my presentation. Amber, you're the board president. You should.
I'll come back to my spot.
You should lead or run the discussion part of this. I think.
All right.
Technically, I should step out of this, and I know I'm doing the presentation and everything, and I will try to answer anything the board has. But all of you should discuss this and your feelings on it, and if the reason we're doing this workshop and we have a meeting next Monday, if all of you want. If any of you or all of you want me to look at doing something different or how this would be, or you have concerns about something, I can work on that between now and next Monday,
So
and then come back next Monday.
If this goes as you'd like it to, where the wrestling room and the locker room in the back, how, I guess, if you're doing compliance for handicap, to get up the steps into that room?
That is a topic of discussion today, what we have to do there, whether we have to, do we do a handicap ramp there? I think I was told if you do a lot of changes in that room, you would have to. If we don't change anything, we may not have to. I don't know
That's that guy's job to figure out over
the
there.
details of that.
Even if we do nothing though, you still have a stage that's not accessible. I think
Right.
there's what code says, and then there's the right thing.
Because I think it's a great idea having everything there. It makes sense.
I will say this, and I wanted to say this if I didn't before, is that Jason Connerman, the wrestling coach, and I went down there, and he told me that they had actually talked about the band room in the past, that it would be great for them. And as he and I talked about it, he was very sold on the idea, because as you know, their current wrestling room, it's large, but it has a pole right in the middle, which he said effectively really cuts down on the space they use. And the other thing is being right next to the gym there where they have their meets and their tournament. It's great. It's a great place where the kids could be warming up who are going to wrestle, and then go right from there right out into the gym and do the wrestling.
And spill over onto the stage for practice.
Yeah.
I feel like that flows really well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
I think having 3 of us on the steering committee was very helpful. Getting us to the stage and our understanding of what's going on with the project. So.
Those of you that know me know that I like to talk a lot, so I'll try to be somewhat brief, but,
Just you.
come on,
Just
Jen.
be yourself, Darren.
A couple things. One, it's clear with the lack of sinking funds, we do not have enough money to keep the buildings going for an extended period of time. Are they fine now? Yeah, we've done a very good job, Spencer. You know, the team has worked very hard to keep these going, and like Chris said, that building was not designed for where it's at now. So, but the sinking fund reduction changes things, in my opinion. And as a member of the board, I want to make sure that I don't leave the board with no idea what we're going to do with the buildings in 15 years when they start having really bad problems. And in the middle school especially, the exterior walls are not good. It's not saying that it's unsafe for the kids to walk in the building now, but at some point it will be. And the estimates for that were, I think, like $4 or $5 million to take all the walls down and build block, and to put that kind of money into that building just seems silly to me, and I think to the rest of the people on the board, or to the steering committee, to invest in something that you're basically building a new building on the outside and haven't started the inside yet. So, and now I lost my train of thought a little bit, but we looked at a lot of different options. You know, the guys from Christopher Institute, you've been very good to answer questions. They've been very helpful. They were here till, I don't know, 9 o'clock. I had to drive home last week, and so I'm trying not to talk too long, but we looked at all the options, and, you know, everyone was like, yeah, K-12 school would be great, but it's, you know, $60, $70 million to do that. And we felt, I say we, the steering committee felt like we couldn't, that was way too much of an ask for this small community. And like Chris had said, you know, if you haven't been paying a bond for 20 years, you've been saving $1 a day. So you've been saving thousands of dollars, you know, over the course of that time. And so at some point we have to do something, and it kind of tied into the fact that we have this potential bond or this potential grant. It may not happen, but we felt like now is the time to do something. Let's have a plan. Let's look at it. And the steering committee felt like this was the best use of the funds. We were all frustrated, myself included, and I've said it 6 times. The cost of things is just stupid. I don't know if I can say that word publicly, but it's stupid. But again, there are some contingencies. They talked about that. So when you say it costs that much to do this, well, once you swallow that pill and realize, okay, this is what it's going to cost, we have to do. So we have to do something. Yes. Okay. What are we going to do? Well, let's do the most logical thing we can do with the budget that we have. And that's kind of how we came to this conclusion. So I think that a lot of people spent time on it and thought about it, and this is the most wise use of the funds. And we think that asking for this kind of money is a lot of money, but like you said earlier, if we do half of it, we're going to get half of the job done. So the bleachers were expensive, but they were falling down the side of the hill, and we were going to have to close that place down. And so, you know, one option was to just put lipstick on the pig and do it again, but we decided no, we're going to start from scratch, and we're going to build it from the ground up, and we're going to, you know, make it last for a long time. And I think that's what we're trying to do tonight.
Yeah, I could build on that. As Chris said, you know, we get to the point where we take the reins in our own hands. We got to control our own destiny, and you know, on the planning commission, we had to write a solar ordinance and a wind ordinance, because if we didn't, the state was going to. And so same here. If we don't take action to build our future for the schools here, we're 2 or 3 major repairs from that happening here. So I don't think anybody in the community wants that. And as a member of the board, I definitely don't. So.
And I also mentioned that everyone I've talked to, people I haven't talked to, people I've heard, said we have to keep, if we're going to do this, we have to keep middle schoolers and high schoolers separate, period. So that's the number one thing that he's talking about, and what we're trying to do, and what we plan on doing. Because if we can't do that, we've not been successful. So we got to keep the kids separate. And then what was my other thing that I have 3 things that I was talking about. Now I'm drawing a blank. We also have to. It was very, very clear to everyone that we can't leave that building sitting. That, you know, we can't say, can we have $35 million, and then in 5 years say, can we have $3 more million to tear that down? That wasn't. The committee felt like that wasn't an option. If we're going to do this, we have to take care of that, so there's no eyesores for people to look at in the future, because that would prevent people from signing up for this.
So that $2 million was for that, and that's already in the 35.
That's included in the list.
Yeah. And we talked a lot about, can we use things, and like he mentioned, we're trying to use things that are strong, that are built well, that will last for a long time. And he wants a new off. No, he can say that.
My only comment about what you presented, which thank you, very much. It was very well put together. Thank you to the steering committee. I know you guys talked a lot and did a lot of research about our community. Excellent, excellent work. The only thing that draws a concern from me is the reduction of sinking fund millage. Because I am not one to not have something in my back pocket for later. When my car's transmission falls out or I need new cabinets in my kitchen. You know, I don't like the idea of getting down to nothing. I don't like the idea of not having something available if we have a true disaster of some sort. That's my only concern in this whole thing that you have presented.
So let me try to help you with that concern a bit. If you chose to go the full 1.5 reduction, yes, after 3 more years, the balance in the sinking fund would be nothing. But then that very next year, with the increase in the property tax values in the area, the next year we would still get 1.5 mills, which would bring in, each mill will bring in roughly $260,000. So the very next year we would bring in another $390,000 that we would have that year to do anything that came up. So for example, if say the third year is the only year where you wouldn't have money.
That's my concern.
So the third year, you could always use money from, if something happened that year, you could say, we need to deal with this, so we're gonna take money from our fund balance to do something like this, or we could borrow again against that sinking fund, like we did to build the bleachers.
Yeah.
We could say, well, we need it this year, but we don't have any money in the sinking fund, but we know we're gonna be drawing $390,000 next year. So yeah, we need to replace this boiler, or we need to fix this. We can go borrow the money, do the work, and then the next year pay it back with that sinking fund. So if some sort of emergency happened to coincide with our low balance in that 1 year, we could handle it. As far as ongoing, because before we always had a mill sinking fund, and then the rest of it always went to projects. We only kept a mill each year for regular maintenance type stuff. Once we get past that low balance, we're fine then for the remaining 4 years with just the lower. Matter of fact, you may at that point in time, and I won't be here because I'll be retired, but you may at that point in time may say after the first 3 years, you know, we've lowered it by 1.5 each of these 3 years. Next year we could lower it by 2 mills. Maybe we only are going to need a mill in sinking. Because the idea of this bond is to cover all the things we know about now and have them done. So, and we'll have new boilers and we'll have a lot of new things. So you may say after the first 3 years of 1.5, well, we can go down to 1 mill. And that would reduce people's taxes. So maybe it goes up by 4.4 the first 3 years, and after that it only goes up by 3.9 if the board votes to lower it even more. So, you know, that's it's just, we can't, I'd like to be able to say you could lower it down to 1 mill right now. We just can't go below 1.5, I don't think, and still say we're gonna have the money to pay that back. Because we've promised the sinking fund money against that debt.
Right.
So we need to have that there.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Does that help with your concern?
It does, because, you know, you don't, I guess for me, I don't think ahead to that next year of that influx of money coming in, but it is, that low year was my concern. And so hearing that explanation of how we could deal with that is.
Yeah, that was a concern for me too, when we looked at how it was, you know, the possibilities from 1.5 to 1.83 that they drew up, which kept our current balance all the way through, you know, and then we figured out if we went to 1.5, that would cover everything, but then we could always borrow against the next year to cover something if it was an emergency.
Right.
But hopefully you won't have a big emergency thing come up during that time,
Right, hopefully.
hopefully.
Yep.
I think using your car analogy, you want to have that extra money when you're driving a 20-year-old car, but if you got a brand new car,
That's
you
true.
might not be so worried about
That's
having
true.
a low year,
Yeah, that's true.
So he explained that to the steering committee, and that's kind of what my thought was at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. That makes sense. Thank
Yeah.
you. That does explain
Just
it.
for what it's worth.
Well, yeah. Great.
I think it also helped. Oh, sorry.
No, actually, I was thinking I would like to find out what people that were on the committee have to share as well. So go ahead, Adam.
I feel like long term it might help us evade that 23-year gap of not having a bond too. So if we tell the community, hey, we're actually going to drop this, so then maybe down the road, we can renew a bond and keep the sinking
Right.
fund,
Yeah.
instead of having that 20 years of not having one. So.
Absolutely. That's true. That's true. Anyone
I feel
else?
we're on borrowed time as far as we've maintained everything for so long. It's
You mean
gonna
right
be-
now we're
it's
on
gonna be
borrowed
over
time?
our
Yeah.
head, Yeah, in no
Yeah.
time.
But yeah, as Darren mentioned how much things cost now, imagine how much they're gonna cost 5 years from now, or 10
Right.
years from now.
Yeah, and these dollars are 2.5, 3 year ahead dollars.
Think of the memes that just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was asked what happens if our enrollment goes up, and we've done this, we've consolidated. And my answer to that was, and remains, that would be a great problem to have. If it goes up, to me, that means instead of dropping to 800, we stay around 900. And I believe this plan will handle the 900 we have now. I'm not saying it's not gonna be tight. I mean, we have we have a couple empty rooms here in the high school, we have a lot of empty rooms in the middle school right now. The elementary is probably the tightest of the 3 buildings, I would say. But, we're making the best use of the space we have. But if it goes up, maybe we'll stay at that 900. Now, if it goes above that, there are places where you could add on if you needed to. And so but you're bringing more money in, and that means people are moving here and all kinds of great things, people with families. And so that's a problem that you could address down the road. But just off the top end of that hallway, it's almost perfectly set up for a couple more classrooms to be added if you needed to do that. So,
Did you do that to keep the windows in the other classrooms? As far as that design?
oh, no, I did that because that's the way they drew it one time. One of their drawings had a hallway like that, and as I saw it, I thought, because I had drawn one that was kind of closed off, and I thought, oh, that's why they did that, because now you have got a hall there, and you have a place to just, maybe you need a couple more rooms, you can just add them on to the end there. Made good sense to me. It gives you an exit there too. So that's why I did it, because I saw what they did.
Anyone else on the board have anything?
I do have one more.
it's your last one, Paul.
As far as parking lot, would that include replacing most of the parking lot?
The parking lot in the front of the building, I haven't gone out and counted spots or anything, or figured to that level of detail. I think it will replace most of it. In terms of how our parking lot is actually used during the day, I think what you'll find if you come here during the day is there are a lot of empty spaces in different areas. The bigger concern, I think, is after school events, field house events. That's when the lot is full. And people a lot of times park over here now and walk over for field house events. So in some ways this will be even better, because when we have football games currently, most people either park over here or they park around this drive. And there are usually, if you come late, you can a lot of times find an empty spot or two over on the west side of the building. And so by putting parking in front, I think you're going to actually help those people out more. And as far as fieldhouse events, if we do the parking across the road in front of the middle school, then people can park here for the field house for events and across the road. it actually, in terms of school operations, helps us divide things a bit. Students, you're over here. Your entrance, high school students, is over there. Staff, you park over here. Your entrance, I mean, they come in there. Maybe some staff might have to park in front. I don't know if there'll be enough over here for staff once we get middle school over here. So some staff might have to park in front, but it actually gives us a nicer place for public to park in front and then walk across into the this office. It also helps us with our traffic flow, because as you know, at the end of the school day, we have people pulling in and out of the middle school, in and out of the high school, and it creates all kinds of problems. This way, they'll only be pulling into and out of one place, and should make the traffic flow a lot more smoothly.
This might be a crazy idea, but is there any way we could purchase the two properties that are right next door and expand that so the loop is larger?
Oh,
In the front.
these?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to see if they were for
Because
sale.
then that would kind of square up the practice field and everything.
Well, that would be nice.
It was
I don't know if it's something that those owners would be willing to do.
I mean, that's.
I think one of them is Dave Mathis, right?
Yeah.
I can tell you right now, I doubt very highly that Mr. Mathis would agree to sell his property.
You never know.
Everybody has a price.
Turn the screws on them over there.
I think as a parent of young kids in the district that recently moved and was under Lakeview's taxes, and they used at times deceptive techniques, I feel like this has been a really transparent process, and I commend Chris on really spearheading that. You know, it's always tough to decide if we're gonna, oh wow, this is gonna be a hit for a lot of the community. I walked through and did SAP yesterday, and it was eye-opening, and I think that our district, the school is a hallmark for our small town, and I think that if we put a big project into it, it's going to be really important. And this touches all. It's not just athletics biased. It's not arts biased. It makes me sick that our Bunsen burners don't even work at our school, because I learned chemistry from Joe T here, and I was a chemistry major in college, and that breaks my heart, and I want my kids to be able to have that. So I feel like this touches everything, and the committee really went in and looked at all the parts and pieces and cut things that we could, but it's such a big project that it's gonna hit, but it's worth it to keep us, you know, to sustain our community here and our unique identity here, but then also modernize the campus. I feel like this is our time to do it.
It's only gonna get more expensive.
Is there anything that, before the board meeting next Monday, that you would like me to look at changing or adding to this, or are you all comfortable with this? Are you all happy with it? Because if you need me to make adjustments or changes, now's the time to tell me before next Monday. Next Monday I'll bring in hopefully a better drawing than what I have here, a little more official looking drawing and some other things, and you'll have one more chance. Public, anybody who's watched this will have another chance to come in and talk, share their piece if they feel strongly one way or the other, and then at that point we need to turn it over to them to get ready for the meeting with the state. Anything?
I think it's fine as it is.
I do too. I appreciate the work that's gone into it.
Yeah. For sure.
Oh,
Agreed.
I would like to ask if there's anybody that was on the committee, like Adam did, that wants to say anything about what they think or anything. Does anyone else have anything they want to say about the meetings or
I'll
anything?
take that as an invitation.
It is an invitation.
I feel that no matter what, it's imperative that we keep a middle school model. Our principals work so hard with our staff to create an amazing culture and climate, and it revolves around a middle school model. If you would have asked me 8 years ago what that is, I'd look at you and say, middle school? I don't know. And I've learned so much, and I feel like a middle school model needs to stay, and that's imperative.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that keeping our middle schoolers and high schoolers separate is imperative. That it should feel like yes, it's one building, but it is two separate schools happening under one roof.
Right.
I think that is imperative, and I think that's very important to our community to understand that our people will be, our little peoples and our big peoples
Right.
will be separate.
Yeah.
Can you quickly explain what a middle school model is?
I know who can better than me.
A middle school model is about creating that culture of community within each grade level. So within our building, we have grade level teams. They share a common plan to be able to, they have the opportunity to coordinate lesson plans, but at the same time, it's also coordinating services between that grade level. So if Emily, I, and Patrick are all on the same team, and Emily's having issues with Darren, but I'm not having issues with Darren, what is it that you're doing that I'm not doing? And so there's a collaboration there about successfully setting up kids to be successful in the middle school when everything else is out of whack for them. And so it's creating these pods of families, for a lack of a better word, for these kids while they're in the building. And each one of them in that building are different, and it comes to what teachers are together and their strengths and their weaknesses, and they come together and form around these kids to make sure that as they move through middle school and face all those other outside challenges that come to middle school kids, that they know that they have the support and services there, and it looks different for every single grade level as they go through. So it's about building that culture and that family dynamic around them as they travel in middle school.
And that contrast, like a junior high model where you would have, instead of teaching by the grade level, you would teach by content area, where you would teach like history to 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. So that's like the contrast between like a junior high and a middle school.
I do have a question.
That's just the name of the building.
I know you have on the east side, the hallway where the high school would come in, there's a divider like a door. Will there be a door like that on the south side, like coming in from this entrance? Will there be a kind of like a door to close off?
So that's a very good question, and we've kind of talked about that. There could be a door placed there, but the reality is also though that those students, they will be using that shared space for band and art.
Right.
So they will be coming back and forth through there, or if they need to go to the media center, which will still be in this space. And so it'll just depend on, I think that's the kind of a thing where we probably put a door, but keep the option to maybe keep it open, because it just depends on how often kids are going through there. You're gonna have doors opening and closing all the time, or whether we also have 8th graders more. That's why 8th grade's on this end of it more.
Right. Yep.
Because they're the more likely, they're closer, so if it was open, it would just be 8th graders that would be in that space. So that is something that we can put in, but with the lounge there in the middle, it's kind of hard. If we had a hard corner there, it'd be easier to do that.
See, I think you should put your office there at the lounge.
Well, one of the things we had
Not your
most
office,
recently,
A office.
one of the things we most recently talked about, Jamie's talked to me about where her office would go, and she'd like to be right in the middle.
I want to be down where Alan's at.
Yeah, she'd like to be in the middle, but here's, part of if she is there,
Yeah.
then her secretary wouldn't be there, because we really need, if we're gonna have office staff, one of the benefits of this is having the people up so they can cover for each other. When one of them's gone, another one can cover, because we even have problems with that in high school now, and you add another, 180 kids in here, we're gonna have more problems making sure we always have coverage with just 2 people in the office. And so, one of the things that, and I apologize, Jamie, I'm gonna show something that I haven't talked to you about yet at all. One of the things that we've talked about is this area. I wish I could. I don't know if I think I can blow that up. Maybe I can if I do it like this on here. Yeah, there we go. One of of the things that I can't draw on here, but one of the things I thought about was, with these spaces here, make this like the middle school office with the secretary and principal. This is part of room 1, and then the hallway which goes to the shared space. The counseling offices could all be in the middle here, high school, middle school counselors, so they could work together, and then high school office down here. And then that way, if parents come in that want to see Jamie, she's still close enough she can meet with them. You know, she's here, they can come in. They'd have to come through the high school office, the vestibule, and told, okay, you can go on down. They could go down and meet with Jamie and those things without having to walk, parents all the way down here. But still, Jamie is closer to her kids. I think she'd be as close here to her 6th graders as she is now to her 5th graders, easily. It's not that far away. And all of them will be coming through here every day to go to lunch. This is where we need the supervision when they're together. We're gonna have, so we've got it in a way here where, you know, our band person, art person are here with, and then the kitchen, when they do come through, this is where both grade levels might be coming through at a similar time, yeah.
Would it make sense to have that lounge be all glass and have the secretaries there? Because you can see all the way down that hall, you can see all the way to the front of the school when people come in, and as soon as you come in, you'd see that and know that that's where you go to talk to somebody.
Well, the point of the vestibule though is that as they come into the vestibule, and if they're allowed to come into the building, they're going into a controlled space where then somebody is escorting them out of that space versus them like right now when you come into the building, you really go wherever you want to go.
Yeah.
You're not like we're running people down. Like, what are you doing? Where are you going?
But I mean, like even for students, like if the high school had an issue, you've got a glassed in area. You have a window for high schoolers and then a window on the other side for middle schoolers to go to.
And again, we're gonna have discussions like this as it
I just feel like
progresses.
it's never going to be used as a student lounge. It's not high school anymore. We might as well make the best space of it. Yeah.
This space?
Yeah.
It could still be used by high school students as a lounge. Matter of fact, we talked about, you know, the high school students can use this as a lounge space. The middle school students, we could put something similar up here
Okay.
for them to use as a lounge space. You know, because they're all up here almost all the time. The only time they come in here, there'd be like 3 art classes a day and 3 band classes a day. The rest of their day is up here, is up in that area. They might go to lunch down here, but odds are after they eat, most of them will head back to the gym, to their gym.
The gym and the lounge area.
Because they have their gym and their lounge area, and the high school kids will go the other way if they go into the field house or whatever they're gonna do. But the lunch periods would be set up in such a way where the kids would, once the bell rings, now they've gotta get to their class before the older kids come in. And again, if we make the changeover from 6, 7 to 8, 9, then you might have a time when 9th graders and 6th graders are crossing, but that's about it. And they've already been in the same building, 5th grade and 8th grade. So you got 6th to 9th. You don't have seniors with 6th grade, ever. You know, so, and then the crossover would be between 8, 9, and 10, 11, 12, where there might be some crossover. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's another way we're trying to keep the kids separate, how we plan out those periods.
Is that
So
vestibule going to be out front or is that going to be inside here?
it would be out front.
Okay.
Wouldn't it?
We can make it so it works inside or outside. A detail for after the bond
Yeah,
process.
that would be a thing.
Whatever is cheaper.
Yeah.
Whatever costs
Yeah,
less.
it's just, if it could be done inside, we'd do it inside, absolutely, because it's saves money. I think there's enough room there. If you'd have to probably fill this door in, make this solid, maybe.
Yeah, we
I-
can some work here, but
That's something to work out, but
Did you have another?
No, I was just, obviously my thought with that was to try and separate the middle school as much as possible
Yes.
with that door. That was
Yeah.
the reason behind my question.
And I do think we will put doors in there because, like I said before, we can block off part of the building then. When we have a game going on, we can keep that shut and people can't come through unless you've got a thing. And then
Well,
whether,
for safety purposes too.
yeah,
Lock that
And-
door. It's one less hallway to get down.
and it's one of those things where as we use it, they may decide, hey, it works better if I just keep that shut all the time, or it works better to keep them open. I mean, that's something that you kind of learn. You only learn once you have it, and then how you use it. With you three guys that came such a distance, do any of you have anything you
I
wanted?
was just gonna ask them if they had anything
Okay.
else they wanted
Sorry.
to say. No, it's
I was
fine.
just saying, I appreciate all the work that the steering committee's done, and yeah, there's a million more decisions and a million more details that'll come after the successful passage of the bond. We're trying to keep this generic to give the district the most flexibility. You know, as Rob indicated, conceptual, but trying to give the district its most flexibility as they move forward. And yeah, I would put a door across that corridor if for nothing else for after hours access, and then you can choose to use it how you want during the day.
I would excuse me, echo all of that and then just add on a little bit, just from the perspective that we get to observe and help districts all across the state do this. And one of the things that really struck me in this particular process with this particular group was just how thoughtful everyone was to try to, understand the needs and the wants and the desires and where that fits and balance that with great consideration and care on what's that financial burden on the taxpayer. It was never, there was never a meeting where that wasn't part of what the conversation was. So it was very, considerate and thoughtful, and what I would say is a wise approach to doing that. So, because you're balancing difficult things, and you're trying to find that sweet spot where people will understand it, support it, and provide the learning environment that your students deserve. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Well, if there isn't anything else that we as the board see that needs to have changed, I think we are fine with proceeding with this to Monday.
Okay, great.
Good
Awesome.
work.
Thanks.
Great work
Thank
to
you.
the committee
Thank you.
as well. I'm just so pleased that everyone worked as hard as they did, and it looks like a great plan.
Question. I know that you met with the staff already and showed them kind of the ideas and give probably the 10th time to give them the presentation. Are you going to meet with them again on this before we meet, or not, or any of the principals?
It's a difficult thing to try to get the whole staff together to meet because we have, certain contractual requirements or, certain, I can't put it this way. There's no way for me to require everybody to meet together again. I can offer it voluntarily and I'm happy to do that, to offer an opportunity for people to come in. I think the where we were as far along in the process when I talked to this, I did have the whole staff together. It wasn't last week, was it? Was it 2 weeks ago? The last month just kind of runs together. I don't know that we were this far along. We were close to this, but the further we get, I'm willing to meet with them. But we did talk through most of this. I tried to answer the questions they had at that time as best I was able to, and I will keep doing that and try to keep sharing the information. I put all this stuff on the website, so like I said, everything's been out there available, and anybody can always come talk to me anytime. My door's always open. So
Great, thank you. Anything else?
What was this?
I was just looking at the wrestling. If we put anyway, it's a competition.
no,
Sorry, it got into.
I talked about
the
enough of
weeds.
that already
Sorry.
today.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, steps for spray up and it's fine.
Cause then the locker room's gonna be low.
Blood sugar lower and good.
All right. Well, thank you again very much. Appreciate it. If we have nothing else to discuss, we will move into our second time of public comment. This is a section of the meeting in which the public may make comments or share their opinions about Union City Community Schools. We ask you to limit your comments to no longer than 5 minutes per person to allow others the opportunity to speak. This is the opportunity for the board to listen to your concerns. It is not board practice to act on the concerns voiced during this meeting to allow for the board to do further research. Do we have any other public comments at this time? You can step up to the podium.
So I just have a couple of thoughts. Me and some other parents in the community have talked a little bit, and some of these things you've already touched on a little bit, but I just want to kind of reiterate some of these things. Number one, the separating of the children. I really appreciate how many times you guys have said how important that is. I also think it's a little delusional to think that we will be able to keep them separate. Especially in today's world, school doesn't stay at school anymore. School follows these kids home on their phones. I worry about confrontations between students. I worry about behavioral concerns, older and younger kids. I worry about inappropriate relationships between kids of varying ages and things. And I just don't know that it's possible to truly keep them separate if they're in the same building. I appreciate that that's something that we want to do, but you can talk to anybody who's worked in facilities with kids that you're trying to keep separate. You don't keep them separate. You just can't. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to talk about was your plan doesn't include anything for the middle school children who would be moving into the high school to do for recess. So is there a playground? Is there something for them to do? I think 6th graders are 12? 12-year-olds need to run and play football and tag and do something other than, sit in the lounge or whatever. So I think that's important and really needs to be considered as part of the plan. It still kind of feels like the high school, but again, these are 12-year-olds. They're little kids, I know 12-year-olds that suck their thumbs and sleep with teddy bears, I don't. And again, having those kids in the same building as adults in some cases, it's really concerning. I don't want to get too personal here, but I was a troubled kid when I was young, and the last thing I needed is to be put in a building with a bunch of 17 and 18-year-old boys. I just really have some real concerns there. The third and last thing I want to talk about is the second most popular thing on your survey was safety from physical threat. I think we kind of all know what that's alluding to. And I don't mean to be dark here, but I worry about if we consolidate, are we just making it easier in the event that something bad does happen by putting all of the kids in one place? One building that needs to be targeted where all of or most of the students are. I don't know. I'm not saying that that's enough to change any minds or anything, but a couple of people have brought it up and I wanted to share that with you guys. So I think that's all I have.
They're good concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I really just want to draw attention to, I do believe there's a couple people on the steering committee that were elementary based or have young children. Right now, there is currently a classroom of sorts, not a full class, I believe it's like an extra IEP type of room that got booted from their classroom and is currently on the stage. So we're already tight in there, it's been stated already. I just want us to really look at the rooms that we have and what we'll be adding and make sure it is enough.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I am not, I was just going to say, I'm not familiar with what I'm going to
We
ask her
follow
about
up
that.
on that.
because I am not familiar with anybody being placed on the stage as a classroom.
OT and PT have been moved to the stage.
Right, Steve.
Right, the room they were in is now occupied with Patrick Hyman. Or an early childhood special ed room. And that was room OT PT had, so OT PT are now on the stage.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no others, I would entertain a motion to go into adjournment.
So move. Second.
Discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Motion is carried. We are adjourned. Thank you for attending. Thank you for being here. Thank you for comments. Thank you for information.
Patrick, that should not have been necessary to do that.
I
The
just
room
found out,
that-
I just found out about it last week.
The room that they're in was not ever meant to be an OT and PT room. We have other spaces for that. So I'm gonna have to ask them why they're doing that.
I don't know if they're
Miss, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'm gonna talk to principal. That room was never meant, that should not have happened. There's another space, another room for that. So I'm gonna find out why they did that. So, and if you'd like to come talk to me sometime, I'd be happy to talk to you about your concerns. We're planning to go look at how Brunson and Palmer, these schools have already combined, how they crossover to their schools. But I know there are those other districts do it and manage it. So we're planning to go talk to them and find out if you want to come.
It's
Can I get your name?
I got electronic copies. I don't have time to get home and get my iPad.
All right, when I get that set up, I will make sure how they handle the mixing of kids.